Picture this. It's a Friday night, and you're sitting around the kitchen table with a few close friends, right?
Best place to be.
Exactly. And you're playing a simple, low-stakes board game. Maybe it's Settlers of Catan or Scrabble or just like a casual game of cards.
Right.
But then someone takes their turn, and you catch them uh, moving their piece one space too far. Or maybe palming a card. They cheated.
Oh, the absolute worst.
It is. Suddenly, your blood pressure just spikes. You are furious.
Yeah.
And it's a bizarre kind of anger, isn't it? Because, I mean, in the grand scheme of the universe, it doesn't matter at all.
No, not even a little bit.
The physical pieces on the board are literally just cardboard and plastic. So why do we get so incredibly mad when someone breaks the rules of a silly game?
Well, it's a really profound reaction, actually, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the cardboard itself. The anger is never about the physical components. It's about a much deeper, almost primal violation of a shared reality. I mean, we like to think of games as trivial, but the way we interact with their rules reveals pretty much everything about how we interact with each other.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are so glad you're sitting down with us today, learner, because the topic we're exploring is the fascinating social science of game rules.
Yeah, it's a great one.
We're looking at how designing boundaries, these arbitrary constraints we willingly put ourselves in, can actually spark immense creativity.
Exact.
Today we're pulling from some incredible masterclass game design theory, academic texts like Jesse Schell's The Art of Game Design and Salin and Zimmerman's Rules of Play, plus some really cool real-world case studies.
Yeah, the case studies really bring it to life.
They really do. Okay, let's unpack this. We're going to start with the literal rule book, right? The inside-the-box rules.
Right, the explicit rules.
Yeah. And I was thinking about this, and the best way I can describe these explicit rules is to compare them to, like, a physics engine in a video game.
Yeah.
Or just the laws of physics in our universe.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right. Because gravity doesn't tell you where to walk, but it establishes the absolute boundary of your reality. Inside-the-box rules, which designers often call operational or explicit rules, they're the physics of the game space.
They establish the gravity.
Exactly. The boundaries, the expectations, the consequences of every action.
Taking your physics engine analogy a step further, if gravity suddenly just, turned off in a video game, the player wouldn't know how to move.
They just float away.
Right. The entire structure interaction collapses. Rules provide that gravity. From a design perspective, rules aren't actually there to restrict you. They are the language through which a game communicates with the player.
The language. I like that.
Yeah, because without rules, a player might pick up the game pieces and experiment, maybe build a little tower out of dice.
I've definitely done that while waiting for my turn.
We all have. But there's no shared structure there. There's no shared meaning. Think about the dice game Yahtzee. You have these physical objects. I mean, you could light them on fire. You could try to eat them. You could throw them at the wall.
I would definitely be throwing them at the wall if I kept rolling ones.
Right, but you don't actually do any of those things. You follow the explicit rules, you roll them, and you interpret the numerical results.
Because following those rules means doing something incredibly narrow and specific.
Exactly. Jesse Schell points out in his book that rules define the space, the objects, the actions, the constraints, and the consequences. But most importantly, they add the crucial thing that transforms a playful activity into an actual game.
Yeah.
They add goals.
Goals, right. Because without a goal, you're just, like, messing around in a sandbox.
Precisely. The rules say, here is your objective, and here is exactly how you are allowed to achieve it.
But the texts we're analyzing also emphasize that these inside-the-box rules have to be perfectly clear, right? Like, they need to be explicit and unambiguous.
Oh, absolutely. If they're too complex, it's like trying to speak a language where the grammar constantly changes. The player just gets frustrated and checks out.
Yeah, I've played board games like that. It's miserable.
Good explicit rules are easy to remember and apply because they have to be repeatable and binding. The game designer is essentially writing a contract.
A contract with the player.
Exactly. If you're playing baseball in an abandoned lot and using a tree as second base, you have to agree on the explicit rule, like what counts as touching the base, the roots, the trunk.
Right. If that isn't clear, the game just collapses into an argument.
Instantly.
Which is an interesting transition, actually. Because let's talk about the arguments that happen even when the rules are clear.
Oh, the loopholes.
Yes. If explicit rules are just the physics of the game, and they're clearly written down in the manual, why do players still get furious when someone does something that technically isn't against those written rules.
Well, we all know that player.
You know exactly the type of player I mean. The person who exploits a loophole. They don't technically cheat, but they play in a way that is incredibly annoying. Or they stall the game indefinitely. Or they just target one specific player out of pure spite.
Yeah, the manual doesn't explicitly say you can't do those things.
Right. So why does it make us so mad?
What's fascinating here is that the written manual is really only half the story. And this brings us to what designers call outside-the-box rules.
Okay, outside-the-box rules.
Yeah. These are the cultural expectations, the social norms, and the unspoken agreements that players bring with them into the room. In game studies, Katie Salen and Eric Zimmerman discuss this wonderful concept originally coined by Johann Huizinga. It's called the magic circle.
The magic circle. Sounds mystical.
It kind of is. When you sit down to play, you enter an artificial boundary, this magic circle where the laws of the real world are temporarily suspended and the rules of the game take over.
Okay, so inside the magic circle, bankrupting your sibling in Monopoly is totally fine, whereas doing it in real life would, ruin Thanksgiving forever.
Precisely. But stepping into that magic circle requires an immense amount of cognitive buy-in. You have to adopt what philosopher Bernard Suits calls the losery attitude.
Losery attitude.
Yeah.
What does that mean exactly?
It's a very peculiar state of mind. It basically means you voluntarily accept unnecessary obstacles just to make the activity of play possible.
Let's linger on that for a second. Voluntarily accepting unnecessary obstacles. That completely reframes what a game actually is.
Doesn't it? Think about running a race on a track. If your only goal in life was to get from the starting block to the finish line as efficiently as possible, you just cut straight across the grass infield.
Right, it's the shortest distance.
But you don't do that. You stay in your lane, you run the curve, and you accept the inefficiency because the inefficiency is the game.
Rah.
You're adopting the losery attitude. You're agreeing to be bound by arbitrary limitations for the sake of the experience.
I understand the theory there, but I have to push back a little on how a designer handles this practically.
Sure.
Because if outside-the-box rules are just the cultural baggage, the personal expectations, and the specific moods every individual brings to the table, how can a game designer possibly account for that?
It's a huge challenge.
Right. You can write a mathematically tight rule book, but you can't control the fact that, like my friend Dave, is incredibly petty and holds grudges from 3 games ago.
Yeah.
It seems impossible to design a system that accounts for infinite human variables.
Well, you certainly can't design a system that accounts for Dave's specific brand of pettiness.
Nobody can.
But you can design with an awareness of universal social contracts. Jesse Schell references David Parlett's analysis of rules, specifically highlighting something called behavioral rules.
Behavioral rules.
Yeah.
So like good sportsmanship.
Basically, yes, they are implicit to gameplay, but they're far more structural than just being polite. The example used in the text is brilliant. It says behavioral rules dictate that during a highly competitive game of chess, you should not tickle your opponent while they're trying to think.
I mean, no tickling is definitely not in the official rules of chess. I've read them.
It isn't. Nor does the rulebook explicitly state that you can't take 5 hours to make a single move just to bore your opponent into forfeiting.
Right.
Those things are seldom stated explicitly. Everyone just knows them. And that proves that a game is fundamentally a social contract.
So to go back to my opening question about why we get so mad at a cheater.
Exactly. The anger we feel is rarely because they broke a hard-coded explicit rule. We aren't mad about the math of the game being violated.
We're mad because they violated the social norm.
Yes, they violated the implicit rule of trust and safety that was required to enter the magic circle in the first place.
So when someone cheats, they aren't just breaking the mechanics of the game. They're breaking the social trust. They're looking at you and communicating, I do not respect the contract we implicitly signed when we sat down at this table.
That's exactly it. Bernard de Koven, a major game philosopher, writes about this extensively. Players rely on each other for safety and trust. If you enter a game knowing someone might trick you outside the bounds of the rules, or gloat mercilessly, or just flip the board in a rage, you wouldn't play.
No, I'd find different friends.
The implicit rules are the outer walls that protect the magic circle.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Yeah.
Because players bring all these outside expectations into the game, they are definitely not just passive consumers of the designer's rules.
Not at all.
They're active participants. And when the inside-the-box rules, the explicit ones we talked about, clash with their outside-the-box desires, Players take matters into their own hands, don't they?
They absolutely do.
They start rewriting the code of the game itself.
Yes, and this introduces a critical concept for any kind of system design, whether you're building a board game, a piece of software, or an entire corporate structure, and that is house rules.
House rules. I have an analogy for this one, too.
Let's hear it.
Have you ever been to a park or like a college campus, and there's a beautifully paved sidewalk that goes in a sharp right angle, but right through the grass in the middle, there's a dirt path worn down by hundreds of footsteps?
Oh, yes. Urban planners call those desire paths.
Desire paths, the visual representation of human intent defying structural design.
That's a perfect way to put it.
To me, house rules are the desire paths of game design. The designer laid down a paved sidewalk, the explicit rules, but the players realize, hey, we actually want to go this way. So they trample the grass until a new rule is formed.
House rules are the modifications players make completely on their own. They emerge because players want to improve the pacing, tweak the balance, or just maximize their own enjoyment. And from a designer's perspective, house rules or even players exploiting or griefing the system are an absolute goldmine. They are incredibly valuable feedback.
Because they show you exactly where the paved sidewalk is failing.
Exactly. They highlight exactly what is broken, what is causing friction, or simply what is unfun in the core design. The players are doing the diagnostic work for you. Let's look at the classic example detailed in the sources, which perfectly illustrates the math behind this. Monopoly.
Oh, Monopoly, the destroyer of friendships.
The ultimate test of the magic circle. By the official, written inside-the-box rules, a game of Monopoly is actually designed to end in about 90 minutes.
Wait, really? 90 minutes? I don't think I've ever played a game of Monopoly that lasted less than 3 hours.
That's because of house rules. The explicit game is supposed to be ruthless. It operates on a system of intense artificial scarcity. You land on a property, and you either buy it or it goes immediately to auction. You go bankrupt quickly.
Wow, I completely forgot about the auction rule.
Most people do. The math of the game is designed to drain capital from the players and return it to the bank. But historically, players found those rules too harsh. It didn't fit their outside-the-box desire for a cozy, accumulating, long-form family activity.
So what do?
They invented house rules, the most famous one being the free parking jackpot.
Oh, yeah. Every time you pay a fine or a tax, instead of returning that money to the bank like the explicit rules demand, the money goes into the middle of the board. And whoever lands on free parking gets a massive cash infusion.
Yes. And this is a perfect example of transformative play. The players did this to make the game feel friendlier and more forgiving, but the systemic mathematical effect is massive.
Because they're injecting all that free cash back into the economy.
Right. They inadvertently shift the system from a deflationary economy to a hyperinflationary one. They completely remove the scarcity that's supposed to drive players bankrupt.
So they're essentially printing money, which means players who should have been knocked out of the game an hour ago can suddenly afford to pay the massive rents on Boardwalk and Park Place.
They completely break the physics engine of the game. And as a result, they stretch a 90-minute game into a 3, 4, or 5-hour agonizing marathon.
That is wild.
It perfectly proves how player-created rules can dramatically alter a system's intended behavior. The designer's explicit rules are completely overridden by the player's implicit desire path.
So we've all been blaming Monopoly for being a 5-hour slog, but we actually did it to ourselves by refusing to follow the ruthless explicit rules. We paved our own terrible desire path.
We modified the system to fit our social contract, prioritizing a feeling of fairness or delayed elimination over the mechanical efficiency of the game's design.
Okay, but if changing Monopoly's rules ruins a fake economy, what happens when people start rewriting the rules of an actual workplace?
It gets much more complicated.
Because this active rewriting of rules, this tension between what is explicitly written and what people implicitly do, it doesn't just happen around a cardboard box. Our workplaces, our supply chains, our civic institutions, they're essentially just giant rule systems, right?
Absolutely. Every corporate policy, every standard operating procedure, every algorithm dictating a delivery route, those are just inside-the-box operational rules applied to reality.
I was reading the Swedish Post case study from our sources, and it is a perfect illustration of this.
Yes, that's a great example.
Management had this incredibly optimized, mathematically perfect route system. They drew the explicit rules for how the mail should be delivered. But it failed entirely on the ground. And I don't get it. If the math was right on paper and the explicit rules were clear, why didn't it work?
Because management optimized for the wrong variables. They designed the explicit rules using mapping algorithms that optimized for minimum mileage. They drew straight, linear paths on a map.
Makes sense on paper.
But the explicit rules didn't account for the physical reality of the postal workers. The algorithm didn't factor in steep cobblestone hills. It didn't factor in the weight of the mail. Like, some routes were heavy with thick catalogs, while others just had light envelopes.
Oh man, so some people were just exhausted.
Exactly. It didn't account for human energy levels varying throughout the week or the weather.
So the explicit rules were like a video game physics engine that forgot to include friction or stamina.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it. The system was way too rigid, so the postal workers, much like frustrated game players who invent a free parking jackpot, essentially began to hack the system.
They created house rules for delivering the mail.
Yes, they did.
How did they actually do that? Did they just ignore the routes entirely?
They created their own unofficial, implicit workarounds. They started swapping routes based on physical reality. A worker who had a bicycle might take a route that was longer in distance but flatter in elevation. A worker with a push cart might take a shorter route that involved a lot of heavy lifting. They altered schedules, they handed off bundles to each other in ways that directly violated the explicit management rules.
They trampled the grass and made a desire path. But here's what I find so compelling about this. They weren't breaking the rules to be lazy.
Not at all.
They were breaking the rules to win the game of delivering the mail efficiently. Their implicit workarounds actually made the mail delivery functional.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this demonstrates something profound about human behavior. Game-like rule structures influence real-world systems. When the explicit rules of a workplace fail, the social contract of the workers will inevitably step in to create implicit workarounds. Any system, whether it's a corporate hierarchy, an educational institution, or a social network, is an open system of meaning. People are constantly negotiating the rules. Salin and Zimmerman refer to this phenomenon as transformative play, where the players broker social power by asserting their own real rules over the system's ideal rules.
The ideal rule is the mathematically perfect map in the employee handbook. The real rule is how the heavy catalogs actually get up the steep hill.
Exactly.
And it strikes me that management in that situation probably viewed the workers as cheaters or just rule breakers, when in reality, the workers were providing massive, incredibly valuable feedback that the core design of the delivery system was fundamentally flawed.
In game design, if your players are constantly breaking your rules to make the game playable, you don't call them stupid. You don't just yell at them to follow the manual. You redesign the game.
Right.
Real-world managers and system architects could learn an immense amount from that. When people hack your system, they are showing you the flaws in your architecture.
So what does this all mean? Whether you're managing a team, designing a new app or product, or just trying to navigate the bizarre social dynamics of your neighborhood association, you are speaking the language of rules.
You absolutely are.
And the biggest lesson here is about friction. If your team or your users or your kids are constantly breaking your explicit rules, don't just get mad and double down on enforcement. Look at the desire path. Look at the house rules they've invented to get around your system.
It's all data.
Because more often than not, they aren't trying to ruin your game. They're showing you exactly how to fix your design. The gap between what you explicitly demand and what people implicitly do is where all the valuable data lives.
Understanding that gap between the ideal rules we write down and the real rules we actually follow is the key to mastering any system. It's how you turn a rigid boundary into a space that actually sparks creativity and efficiency.
If you want to see the Swedish Post case study in full, Learner, along with the specific logistical breakdowns of how the workers reorganize the routes, join the course community. There is so much more there about how these systems play out in real time, and it is absolutely worth the read.
This raises an important question, though, one I want to leave you with to ponder long after this deep dive ends.
Let's hear it.
We've established that our behavior is governed far more powerfully by the unwritten social contracts we agree to, rather than the explicit rules we are handed in a manual. So, take a look at your own life. What implicit, outside-the-box rules are you unconsciously following right now? And more importantly, is it time to rewrite them?
Are you playing by a rule book you didn't even know you agreed to? And what happens if you decide to change the house rules? It brings us right back to that kitchen table. We're all just trying to figure out if we're playing the same game and whether or not the rules we share are actually serving us. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the rules, and we'll see you next time.
Do you want to learn more about game design? Try our game design course. Go from learning the basics to becoming a master game designer. No coding skills needed. Taught by award-winning game designer Gabe Mack, this course is filled with hours of videos, puzzles, tools and exercises to turn you into a serious game designer. Why are you waiting to harness the power of play? Visit school.thegamebeyond.com to sign up today.